something that we have
What's going
seen
on,
from
everybody?
time to time. I guess I'm not
We're trying a
categorically
new
opposed to
direction
talking about
for the
it.
channel
I think
here.
introducing resolutions, as we've seen, has been a significant escalation. And of course, it would depend on why. I mean, I think there was serious discussion of impeachment of several sitting Supreme Court justices over ethics matters in the last few years. I don't think there's anything unhealthy about those discussions.
It's okay to talk about impeaching Supreme Court justices. It's okay to add 4 associate justices to the Supreme Court, and you had no problems with the comments made after the Dobbs.
What's going on, everybody?
Is that your testimony?
You know, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what specific comments you're talking about, but criticism
We're
of the
taking
substance
this-
of the Dobbs ruling, I have no problem with that.
You're back.
The witnesses have been very kind, and there are more people that want that kindness. So with that, we'll take a 5-minute recess.
Oh, but good thing we rewound it. Hopefully we're back. If not, I want to rewind it to Jordan again. Right about here. So we're like up to date
Some of
here.
the previous
My
speakers on the other side
video
have said,
dropped
members on the
before.
other side have said attacks by President Trump. I think I got this right. Attacks by President
I
Trump.
have
on
the,
judiciary are dangerous. They said criticism
Wi-Fi
of judges weakens
on an
the
APC. It's
judiciary.
a backup battery. The backup
Mr.
battery
Larkin,
failed. It's 7 years old.
Have Democrats ever criticized the judiciary?
Yes, sir.
Can you give me an example that maybe comes to mind? I mean, I have several, but I want to know what's one that comes to mind for you.
Well, I guess the best example and recently was the Supreme Court's decision.
My daughters are in this game
in
right now.
Dobbs to
So.
overturn Roe versus Wade.
Yeah, where like
This is a
hundreds of
dress-up game that little
churches
girls
and
play.
Pro-life centers were attacked and firebombed, and got all kinds of criticism coming from people that have. How about this one? How about the minority leader in the Senate said, "I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you've released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price." How about that one? You remember that one?
Yeah,
Speaker
it's so
Gingrich?
funny.
Senator Schumer?
Oh, wife's calling. It's not your typical
I think it's fair
stream.
to say
What's
that
going on?
passion of the left
Hello?
court does
What's
the wrong
going on? Yeah,
probably
what's
is
up? What's
more
up?
professionally organized than any
I'm
passion
on
on the
stream.
right.
I'm playing just to
And
impress.
Look, I mean, Franklin Roosevelt tried to pack the
Mm-hmm.
court. And he was a Democrat.
Say hi to everybody.
There's a long tradition in America.
I'm on.
that we're allowed to
Say
argue
hi.
with
Say
the
hey to
court.
everybody. Wait, I need you to say hello to the
Not
stream. Say hi.
a
You're on
religious
speaker.
judicial system. It's a secular judicial
Yeah, I know. I just went
Yeah,
live
fair
2
enough.
minutes.
And look, we're
2
going to
minutes ago.
criticize decisions
Yeah.
all along. We're getting it one way. This goes both ways. Both sides have criticized the courts.
Oh no,
Criticized
it dropped
decisions. We're allowed
before.
to do
It
that in
dropped.
this country. That's the way
that
it
backup
works.
battery, our Wi-Fi
Professor Shaw,
routers
do you-
on and stuff.
Do you think
that-
it was appropriate for what Mr. Schumer, Senator Schumer, said on the steps
Yeah,
of the Supreme
makes
Court?
sense. Adds up.
When he said you will pay the
What's
price,
up?
represent
Should I
two
take you off
members, sitting
speaker, or
members
do you
of
want
the
to call me
United
back
States
later, or
Supreme
do you want to get in the chat?
I think he should have phrased it differently. I'm sure he feels the same way.
What about the Dobbs leak? What do you think about that and some of the comments that were made after
Alright.
that decision was leaked? Think that was
All
good?
right, love you.
You know, I'm not sure what comments you're talking about.
All right,
the
sorry
very,
about
very
that.
Sharp criticism.
I think this is called a
Justice Alito's opinion
freestyle
in
mode
Dobbs.
here.
I think that's perfectly healthy. Yes.
I'm not a big fan. This
I
is the
think
new
I've never
Daddy Will
said
You
that, but there
Play
should be impeachment
Tea
for
Time.
the decisions
Whatever it
that
is,
were-
right?
that happened
Which I
after
still
the
get.
Dobbs decision, there should be
Still a few of
impeachment
those floating
of one of
around.
the Supreme
All
Court
kids under
justices.
10
Member of
in the
Congress said that.
house.
Do you think that's appropriate?
Shit, I have 3 kids under 10.
You know,
Let me
impeachment
just make
rhetoric
sure.
is something that we have
Yes,
seen
alright,
from
we're
time to
seeing
time. I guess I'm not
mic levels
categorically
are
opposed
good.
to
Allegedly.
talking about it. I think introducing
Allegedly.
resolutions, as we've seen, has been a significant
Do you like the liner
escalation.
here?
And of course, it would depend on why. I mean, I think there was
Custom,
serious
Pierce
discussion
Bespoke,
of
thank you.
impeachment
Thank
of
you,
several
thank you.
sitting Supreme
Thank
Court
you,
justices
thank you,
over
thank you, thank you.
ethics matters in the
All
last
right,
few years.
so
I don't think there's anything
what are we
unhealthy
doing here?
about those
Let me see.
discussions.
Let me
It's
ask.
okay to talk about impeaching Supreme Court justices. It's okay to add 4 associate justices to the Supreme Court, and you had no problems with the comments made after the Dobbs leak. Is that your testimony?
Where's my
I'm sorry, I'm not
dots?
sure
The
what specific comments you're talking
doctors.
about, but criticism of the substance of the Dobbs ruling, I have no problem with that.
I don't know. All right. Hopefully they're out of their
The
little...
witnesses have been very kind, and there are more people that want that kindness. So with that, we'll take a 5-minute recess.
Oh, the wife's in the chat. She gets an ahoy hoy just like everyone else. All right, let's see if they are back. Oh, no, still on a 5-minute break. All right, well, we'll leave that where it is, and now we're really gonna focus here. All right, what we're gonna do? Let me call the daughters. Oh, loud, unnecessarily loud. Sorry, chat. We're working on it. I'm just gonna have to lower the volume for the whole game. And stand by. Roblox. That's too much. Too much. That's my wife gotta go. What a mess. April Fools! Right, let's call the daughters and say, see if we can get them in. Are you gonna join me in Style Showdown?
No.
All right, well tell Faye to.
No, you tell her.
I'm on the stream. Say hi to everybody and be sweet.
Come.
You're coming to.
Maybe get the
What?
names early.
All right, that's my oldest child. She is not the sweetest one, but she is the most assertive.
Take our seats.
And not-
we have
not
we've been
agreeable,
informed that we're going to have a vote,
which I think is a good
in
thing.
about the next 15 or 20 minutes. And Mr. Speaker, with the exception of the Speaker, all of
Oh,
us
sorry.
have to go vote.
There we
We
go.
have Lovian dogs. We will drool otherwise. I think you probably wrote about it, Mr. Speaker.
We're back. We're back. The hearing is back. And the microphone. Oh, there we go.
Committee will come to order. We now recognize the gentlelady from California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member. You know, the student tours have started back up here in the Capitol, and I was walking through the rotunda. I walked past a group of
Oh, thank you for
young kids
reminding
from
me,
Ohio, and
Jacqueline.
the kids were listening to their teacher.
Need to
talk
post
about George
some mugs. Let's
Washington,
post
and
the
then I
allegedly
heard the
mug.
teacher say that this is where we have all of our checks and balances. And I remember thinking to myself, well, only
25
for
or
a few
40.
months more,
Let's do the 40 ounce
you
travel
talk about
mug.
banning books. I was like, well, we might have to
Bam.
ban all of the books that
Top
talk
right
about
corner
checks and
there.
balances because we won't have any at the rate this committee is going. So in fourth grade, children are learning about civics, the three
Where
branches of government,
is the
the
game?
checks and
All right,
balances
uh-oh.
of power between the different branches, the co-equal partnership between the executive and legislative, the independence of the judiciary. Not a new phenomenon. Article 3 judges were established 236 years ago in the Constitution with the lifetime tenure. And we could go back, and I've heard it in this committee, and talk about Marbury versus
We're live,
Madison,
we're
Plessy
live,
versus
yes.
Ferguson, Dred
Anybody
Scott,
who's
but
wondering.
more recent is where I want to land, and I thank the chair for also bringing up some of these rulings. We've had
Oh.
Bush v. Gore, we've had Citizens
Hold on.
United, we've had
The theme is, and I have about 3 minutes. The theme is Harajuku, bold, electric, street Japanese fashion. Oh, no. What do I know about that? Wait, I'm not. What the heck?
But now we have an administration aggressively and unapologetically pushing the
God.
boundaries of what is constitutional and erasing the checks and balances of power by going after judges who do not side with Trump. To the point that even Justice Roberts of Republican lore says it is
Street Japanese
inappropriate to
fashion.
impeach judges. And after all, he is part of the ultimate arbiter in this arena, which favors the Republican Party with a 6-3 majority.
God.
So I'm asking myself, what is really going on?
It's a really
What
good
is going
point that
on
Gingrich
is we are
brings up
setting
that the
a dangerous precedent
Democrats,
by
like,
replacing
really do get up in
judicial
arms
independence
about
with
the
judicial
judiciary,
fealty.
but at the same time,
because
they're
if
the
judges
first
feel
ones
like
that
they
are ready
must follow
to,
a partisan ideology
take a
rather than
hatchet to it.
independently interpret the law, then we, as
Strange
lawmakers,
breed.
are a shill in this charade. We do not make laws for ourselves to interpret.
Okay.
We
Your
make laws
face
for
is not
judges to
giving me
interpret and impose
Japanese
punishment
street
to those who
fashion
don't
vibes.
follow them. And what is sad is that all these decisions that Trump doesn't like
Closer.
are still appealable. So once again, what is going on? What is going
What's
on
going
is,
on?
instead of being a party that supports smaller government, Republicans are creating a far-reaching leviathan, an insatiable, chaotic monster of power. And once that locomotive starts going, you cannot put the brakes on. This judicial independence, checks and balances have withstood 118
So I noticed,
Congresses
I
and
just need to check
46
on this.
presidencies.
Excuse me,
and
Ms.
somehow
Comlager that, you know, who knows why things shake out the way they do. Stacey Plaskett, still an elected representative from the Virgin Islands. Also, someone who represented Jeffrey Epstein in some capacity. Harriet Hagman referred to her as Jeffrey Epstein's fixer. Not on the Judiciary this session, in the 119th Congress, if I'm not mistaken. She was, at times, the ranking member on the subcommittee, the Judiciary's weaponization of the lawfare weaponization hearings, something like that. So that was a big deal. It's a big deal, in my opinion, for them to remove Jeffrey Epstein's fixer from the Judiciary Committee. I think it's a good step in the right direction as far as, you know, getting that whole blackmail thing behind us. I don't know. But let's now start arresting some people, right? And I have some strong feelings. I've been thinking about things, you know, what we want to see, and I think we do want to see, you know, gang members deported who are here illegally from other countries who just emptied their prisons and insane asylums onto our streets, right? But do we want to impeach judges for stepping outside their lanes of power, especially when you don't have the votes to impeach? Why spend the judicial, the political capital, I should say? Why risk, you know, the biscuit? As far as being an attorney and getting really up, you know, overly vocal about the whole thing. So, I don't know. I think that what we're gonna see is, like, and Jim Jordan said this, and we're gonna clip it. Is we have to. You have three tools, right? There's impeachment, which I don't think is appropriate because you don't have the votes. So why even, you know, sure, entertain it, bring it up, but I just don't. Legislatively, you can fix this. Right by I think what Darrell Issa has a bill that's proposing to do is putting an end to nationwide injunctive orders. And then the third tool is the purse, which is just defunding the courts in some capacity. Those are the three tools. It's off the top of my head, right? And here's Kylie. I like him, so we're gonna listen to him.
He will continue in our very hearts.
And with that, I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady. We now go to the gentleman from California for his 5 minutes.
If I don't vote, I lose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In our state of California, we have a governor who routinely attacks judges when he doesn't get his way, often in very harsh terms. This being Governor Newsom. Of course, after one ruling related to the Second Amendment, Newsom threw a veritable temper tantrum, calling a special press conference to lambast the judge, calling him an extremist, a stone-cold ideologue, a wholly funded subsidiary of the NRA, and saying, quote, "We need to call this federal judge out. He will continue to do damage, mark my words." So it is curious hearing some of the comments about the appropriate relationship between the branches, different branches of our government, and the appropriate way to opine on judicial opinions with that in view. And we've also, of course, seen examples brought up by Chairman Jordan related to Chuck Schumer's comments on the steps of the Supreme Court that were rebuked by
eliminated in the first round.
So there
I'm
certainly is,
kind of pleased
I think
by
it's
that.
appropriate
I was good at
as
this
elected
game. That might be a
officials
problem.
for us to express views on opinions of the judiciary, but the idea that one side has crossed a line, but the other has not, simply is not borne by the evidence. Now, the broader question before us today, I think, is related to this issue of checks and balances, because I think we've reached a point where checks and balances have gotten a bit out of whack, given developments that were not really on the minds of the founders, related to the idea of nationwide injunctions, which didn't exist in the early years of the Republic, or really not until modern times. And given the expansive growth of the federal judiciary, such that now you have not just an issue of the judiciary impeding the president or impeding Congress, but rather you have the ability of any individual judge to do so. As Justice Gorsuch has said, the government's hope of implementing any new policy could face the long odds of a straight sweep, parlaying a 94-0 win in the district courts into a 12-0 victory in the courts of appeal. So what these nationwide injunctions have effectively done is not just shifted power from one branch to another, but empowered the most extreme people within the judicial branch by saying that we're going to give one judge who can be essentially picked by the plaintiffs the ability to put a policy on hold. And what this creates is a sense of stasis, and I think a sense of frustration. And you see this during Republican and presidential administrations, that the levers that we have to really
by the way,
have
just going to be building up to the JFK hearing it too.
Exercise its will are getting increasingly difficult to pull. You know, we have increasing hurdles to legislation, the ability to get over a filibuster in the Senate to change policy that way. And then even when the president is exercising his duly granted authority, we have these nationwide injunctions that are putting the president's agenda into stasis. And so I do think there is an appropriate opportunity here to see if we need to recalibrate the way checks and balances are functioning. And I think that on top of that, it's a matter for the judiciary itself, because the way our system generally works is you have different forums, you have different cases addressing similar issues involving different fact patterns, you develop a factual record, you have different judges that provide a different sort of analysis, and then to the extent that they conflict, it percolates up the system. You have that record in place, and you can then come to a decision that has the most fully considered process, that within our system. And these nationwide injunctions are short-circuiting that entire process, not allowing for the merits of an issue to be duly considered, and simply giving one particular judge, often on the extreme end of the distribution, full say on the matter. So, Mr. Gingrich, Speaker Gingrich, you've mentioned a few possible remedies here. One that caught my attention was the ability of the Chief Justice to establish a procedure as it concerns nationwide injunctions. What would that look like?
Well, thank you, Raj. Look, it would be the least intrusive and least disruptive to have the Chief Justice decide, and the court decide. It'd be very simple. Yes, a district judge can render a judgment, but the moment he or she renders an injunction beyond their district, the Supreme Court would immediately intervene,
4 stars,
suspend imposition of the remedy until the the Supreme Court rendered a decision. If the Supreme Court said you're right, then you have a Supreme Court enforced nationwide injunction. But if the Supreme Court said, we're not convinced, then it would vitiate the whole thing and it would be over. And you would not have the ability of individual district judges to make radical decisions. Remember, justice delayed is justice denied. You start having, this is where, frankly, the Chief Justice was, I think, a little bit silly. To say, well, there's an appeals process. If you're talking about getting rid of criminals, or you're talking about defending the country, an appeals process can run so long that the damage has already been done by the time you go through the appeal. And so I think in some form, if we're going to retain the ability of district judges to issue any injunction, it has to be modified.
I didn't want a place.
If we can't get a modification, it has to be abolished.
Thank you very much, and I would encourage the Chief Justice to hopefully be thinking about this from his perspective. And in Congress, we of course also have tools to create expedited appeals.
There's some little girl out there at the place.
I think that frankly,
maybe
that's
they're crying, and I'm very
perhaps
sorry
a compromise
about
that both sides could come to, since this will be an issue that arises in future administrations as well.
I thank the gentleman.
We're not here to make friends.
I now
We're here to
ask
win.
unanimous consent that Ms. Crockett be permitted to participate in today's hearing for the purpose of questioning a witness if a member yields time for that purpose. And without objection so ordered, I now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Swalwell.
We're about 2+ hours into this hearing, maybe 3.
Physical reaction.
And as I'm taking stock, we're here because some guy I've never heard of, he might be in Congress, introduced an impeachment resolution, but he's not here. He hasn't been here for at least the last hour, and every witness here is in agreement that we really shouldn't be impeaching judges. I haven't heard a single colleague on the other side say we should be impeaching
Would the gentleman
judges.
yield?
Not yet. And this guy's just raising bucks on this issue. This is like a
Naughty or
fundraising
nice
ploy,
is the
but
theme here.
we all are here, like we're in our suits, we're wasting, or we're not
Christmas
dedicating ourselves to other
something.
matters because this guy wrote some article. It just seems kind of absurd to me because no one even thinks that's the remedy. And I dare, whoever this person is, I hope he would come, I dare him to bring a privilege resolution because we could actually debate this, but it's just a stunt. I promise you, it's a stunt. I will contribute to his campaign if he brings before this
Who's he
committee
talking about?
an impeachment resolution.
Jim Jordan, maybe? He really doesn't like
Now,
Jim Jordan.
Speaker, you said some of these judges are pretend presidents,
How
rogue
much would the
judges,
gentleman give to his campaign?
700 district judges that are pretending that they're president. There's a judge, a single judge in a federal courthouse in Amarillo, Texas, where conservatives are form shopping and having cases sent to him, Judge Kaczmarek. In 2023, he suspended mifepristone approval. That's a medical abortion pill. Can you direct me, Speaker, to the statement you gave objecting to him doing that? I couldn't find it.
No, I haven't spoken out on this issue until I was invited to come here.
Okay.
I wrote about it in 2011, and I've submitted that for the record.
How about when Judge Kaczmarek ruled against ACA protections for LGBTQ individuals in November 2022?
Well,
Did you speak out against that rogue judge?
I think the term "I have not spoken on this issue until I was invited here" was generic and included every single one of the cases you want to ask about. So I will stipulate in advance. I did not comment because I did not comment. And I'm not here to comment on a single case.
How about an
I'm here to
elect-
say-
okay, I
I'm
got
here
it.
to say that the system is out of whack.
Speaker-
Which, by the way, I wrote about in 2011.
An elected Trump third term, is that constitutional? I think it's funny too.
If the Congress wishes
First
to
good
pass
question,
a
you know?
constitutional amendment, and the requisite number of
From
states
him.
decide to endorse that amendment, of course, he would have the option to run for re-election. In the absence of that kind of constitutional change, I think that it's impossible.
Thank you. And with that, I'll yield to the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Crockett.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate the speaker for admitting openly on the record that it is unconstitutional. But the concerns that I have are around the fact that we are sitting here pretending as if we all are looking out for the Constitution, yet we are coming from completely different
Maybe he
angles.
was
So
talking about
let me
Gil.
go to Professor Shaw. To be clear, which branch of government is responsible for interpreting what is and what is not legal?
Well, the Supreme Court, the Article 3 judicial branch has the final word.
So the judiciary is who it is. So it's not the legislators.
You know, I'd say every branch has an obligation to interpret the Constitution. The final word comes from the courts.
From the courts. It's not the former speakers. It's not everyday people. It's not the president. I just wanted to make sure that we understood who it was that was responsible. And what is so frustrating for so many of the American people, the ones that are watching right now and otherwise, and the reason that they're outraged and scared is because what we see right now is a diminishing of all these institutions. Right now, we have a legislative branch that has decided that it intentionally would disregard their duties. They are not checking the president whatsoever. The only check that the American people have had thus far has been from the judiciary. And the judiciary isn't pulling this out of the sky. In fact, they are coming from basic reading of like the plain language of the Constitution for all of those that are constitutionalists when we start talking about things such as what birthright citizenship is. But one of the things that I want to make sure that I get to, because there are deeper implications if we go down this rabbit hole. Imagine the type of world where the president does whatever he wants to and no one can rein him in. It's a world that right now many people are afraid of. Let me put it this way. If Joe Biden would have done an executive order for abortion, despite what the Supreme Court said, that would have been a problem. Imagine if the state of Colorado kept Trump off the ballot and other states follow suit. That would have been a problem. Or imagine if Jack Smith ignored Eileen Cannon and with the help of an activist judge decided that he was going to prosecute the sitting president anyway.
Yeah, he's gone radio
The problem that we have
silent.
right
That should
now
tell
is
you
that if we
something.
continue
If I
down this
was,
road,
you know,
then we
on
will
some
not
sort of
have a rule
righteous
of law
path
because
and I
we
was
have
believing what I
people
was doing
that are
was right, I'd
currently
still be
serving and they're
screaming it
saying
from the
things like,
rooftops.
ignore the
People
judge's
with
order.
brittle spirits who are doing
what
their
it
own
means to
thing
have
that
law and order in this country
that move,
is that
in my
you follow the order and you go through the appeals process, even if you dislike what the judge did. Thank you, and I yield.
And I'll yield back to Mr. Issa. Mr. Issa, you had a question for me, which I'll yield to
It's
you
a
now.
flamethrower.
No, but there's no
How do I
time
get
left.
the flamethrower?
Thanks,
I'm
Eric.
happy to entertain it.
You're good. You're good at that, but I'll take my own time. I'll recognize myself. And I'm going to note that when Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, or AOC as we know her, filed articles of impeachment on Justice Thomas and Alito, Ms. Crockett was one of the co-sponsors along with Mr. Cohen, both members of this committee. It does seem interesting that when the shoe is on the other foot, everyone is self-righteous. And I think this is a good
Thank you.
example.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say.
For the last 3 hours, I have had to listen to one side talking about impeachment as though it was the nature of this hearing. It is not. I keep looking at my friend, the late Henry Hyde, and remember that although he led the impeachment when it was necessary, he did so only during that time and then never mentioned it again in hearings. In fact, he was religiously able to focus on the hearing of the day. The hearing of today is really about the question of the future of the court's ability to do its job as intended. And I'm going to get into a couple of things fairly quickly. Last night, a California judge, Judge Chen, proactively stopped the ending of these temporary protective status. So the very person that they're talking about, who is now apparently back in his home country of El Salvador, can no longer be sent there because a judge has decided in California to stop an action which was done completely by one president at his discretion, and when another president says, I'm ending it at my discretion, they stop him. So I'm going to go to Mr. Larkin first. You mentioned earlier on Alaska, I think, in passing about judges in various places, and I'll reiterate a question that Speaker Gingrich also answered earlier. If one judge can take a case before them and make rulings on behalf of plaintiffs not there, and yet it's a district court judge, and we know that courts around the country routinely take similar cases with different plaintiffs and decide them differently, and that's how we generally get to the Supreme Court, is to resolve those. Is there any reason that this administration couldn't file a declaratory judgment, not in California where Judge Chen ruled, but in some other place, let's say Texas, which has been mentioned today, and get a different outcome, and in fact undo and give in fact the administration a legitimate right to say, no, we've been found not to be enjoined, but we have a right to do it as long as we siphon it through Texas instead of California. Is there any reason today that that doesn't exist as a problem of these national injunctions which are not in the jurisdiction of these judges?
April Fools.
What you're talking about is a problem that the Supreme Court contemplated when it decided the Mendoza case some years ago. It recognized that different courts will decide issues differently, and it decided not to bind the government the first time it lost. If the government lost in Maine, it could continue to take the same position in Alaska or in the other states.
They got like second to last place, which is exactly where it's supposed to.
They basically adopt a one-and-done rule, and the Supreme Court rejected it. So it's permissible under the law.
So when people talk about this president acting illegally, the
and
fact
I will be
is
on
this
camera
president,
for the
by
JFK
acquiescing
hearing coming up in
to
20
these
minutes.
and going through the appellate process,
switch it over,
actually
though.
is going further than he has to under the Constitution. The
April
reality
Fool's
is,
Daniel.
he could simply say, you made your decision, we just won't do it in your district.
Oh
we'll
God,
do it
that would be
elsewhere, and we'll
very
seek
cruel. That would be a very cruel April Fool's joke. I can't imagine them doing that. They've had all their other hearings today as like a matter of course, business as usual. So if that one was a joke, cruel joke.
In Mendoza was unanimous. It included conservatives and liberals on that court, and they allowed that development
So
to
under
occur.
Mendoza, the fact is only the Supreme Court speaks for the entire nation, and that is what we are discussing here today. It's the issue before us. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Metalhead.
Okay, I'm going to just derive a couple of other quick things. there was an earlier question on Rule 65. Now, these are produced by the court, and the unambiguous language of it says that, in fact, at least in some cases, we won't argue over any one of these now approaching 100 cases, there has to be a bond, and yet there have been no bonds. Is that correct?
I have not searched the record in all those cases, so
We have. There hasn't been a bond.
I'll trust you on that.
So Rule 65 is being ignored by these activist judges, and as a result, there's a real question about, in disobedience of those rules, in absence of a bond, they may in fact not be enforceable as valid, correct?
That may be. I would not say they've been ignored, because if they weren't raised by the government as an issue in the case, then they might have just been overlooked. So
I would trust that from this day forward, they will not be overlooked. You've got enough time. This will be the last round until the recess. You're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
There's a double subcommittee, by the way.
Mr. Gingrich, I want to focus on some of your testimony today. You say that a judicial coup d'etat is being implemented by judges of the same political ideology. And another statement you said that Judge Boasberg has a clear bias against President Trump. Do you know who appointed Judge Boasberg?
I think his first appointment was by George Bush.
Correct. And we've been talking about nationwide injunctions. There's been a lot of discussion about the injunction on the president's birthright citizenship executive
hopefully this will reach more people. But if you're in Wisconsin, go vote for Brad
Judge Kuhnhauer. Do you know who appointed Judge Kuhnhauer?
Otherwise, I guess there's a big chance, big risk of gerrymandering.
So let's just focus on
bigger
these
implications
two Republican-appointed judges, so we can just
remove
all the allegations of
margin
partisan
in the House.
bias.
So we're removing the other 90%.
So let's focus first on Judge Boasberg's case, which is the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 law that very specifically applies during wartime or if the country is subject to an invasion. Now, you would agree, I assume, as a former Speaker of the House, that it is Congress's duty to declare war.
I think there's also a provision of the act which does say for invasion, and I think the average American will tell you they feel that we've been invaded
Okay,
by the
good.
policies of the
Good.
Biden.
So the average, so are we now supposed to say that your assessment of the average American's view determines whether or not we are under invasion by Venezuela? So that's what we're supposed to do. Now, is it, if not the average American, what your testimony is here today is that Donald Trump, because he was elected president, alone should determine whether or not that law applies without any due process. Is that your testimony?
My position is that the Supreme Court should have the opportunity in a nationwide issue to render, but remember.
Okay, so let me reclaim my time. So basically what you're saying then is,
all you need, buddy.
The problem here is that Judge Boasberg pre-certified a class because, of course, it is the exact same legal question for every single person who was removed to El Salvador. And what really should happen is that every single one of those people should have to file their own lawsuits. And each district then judge should rule on it. That's the difference, the opposite of a nationwide injunction, right?
These are
actually, as I've said several times in the last 3 hours,
they need to go.
There can be a provision by which the Supreme Court takes up that injunction.
So which is it? Do you oppose nationwide injunctions as a judicial coup d'etat?
No.
Or do you think nationwide injunctions are appropriate in certain circumstances but should have expedited appeal?
I believe that nationwide injunctions by an individual judge is far too much power, and that there can be.
Let's keep on with Judge Boasberg's case. Okay, so he issued, and by the way, he did not issue an order on the underlying issue. He temporarily enjoined the president from whisking off people to another country without due process so that the legal issue could be resolved. Now, you say expedited appeal. That opinion, that case was already appealed to the district court, the Court of Appeals for the district court. They've already ruled. And by 2-1, they kept the temporary injunction in. It was a Republican appointee,
playing
Judge
video
Henderson,
games.
who was one of the two. So
I'm not into it.
I guess I'm confused as to what the problem is with a temporary
Can I stop?
nationwide injunction so that the issue can be resolved, and if necessary, ultimately by the Supreme Court. It sounds like you agree with me that that is the appropriate process.
The difference is whether or not you believe, one, that time matters, and
Well,
the
this
appeals
was
process.
within a matter of weeks. It's now up before the Supreme Court. That's expedited. And I will say, I wholly agree with you. And to my colleague, Mr. Kiley, I would happily work to expedite appeals for nationwide injunctions. I hope my Republican colleagues would work with us to expedite enforcement of congressional subpoenas. The courts take far too long. I agree with you. But the notion that we do not have due process and that someone should be removed without due process based on false pretenses, which the administration now admits under a petition for habeas corpus, I would add, Mr. Larkin, and that there's no recourse because their mistake is now out of their control, I think even you, Mr. Gingrich, would agree with me that when you mistakenly accuse someone of being a gang member and you deport them, that it is incumbent upon you to fix that mistake. Do you agree?
I agree.
And with that, we're going to give you at least until, let's call it 2:30 to return.
Okay.
We stand in recess.
So we're going to return. Let's see if I can just... I don't have it ready to go. I have a be right back screen. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the stream here. If anybody was watching me play Dress to Impress and you were, upset that I ended that abruptly, April Fools. We're going to be coming back in about 15 minutes. Whoa. Coming back in about 15 minutes with the JFK files.